Hi everyone, this is Ethan Dre with Be Creative Studios, and we're back with another video tutorial in Photoshop. And today we're actually going to be reviewing the eraser tools. Obviously, the eraser tool is good for removing unwanted pixels from your document, but there are more settings than most people realize with these eraser tools within Photoshop. So the first thing we're going to do is we have a document here. It's just tree branches with a pretty uniform blue background. A lot of different borders created with these tree branches here, and we're going to show you how to get rid of this background without having to go through and erase every single pixel here. Alright, so if we go over to our toolbox here, we have our regular eraser tool, or keyboard shortcut E, and what we want to do is we want to unlock our background layer. So we're going to double click that and go ahead and hit OK, and you'll notice that our background layer is now unlocked. Now with our regular eraser tool, it's similar to a brush tool. You can choose different brush options here. You can change the size or the hardness, and you have different modes with brush, pencil, or block. We're just going to stick with brush here. Opacity being the level of transparency, and we're going to keep that at 100%, and flow is the level of transparency for each individual brush stroke. Okay? We'll go over erase to history later on in another tutorial, so let's just leave that unchecked for right now. Alright, since we have our background layer unlocked and we have our regular eraser tool selected, as I mentioned, we could always go in here and slowly erase every single one of these pixels. And obviously that's going to be very tedious, especially whenever you could use a layer mask to do essentially the same thing. So that's your regular eraser tool. Wherever you click and brush, those pixels are going to be erased. So if I go back in our history here, now let's return to our toolbox with our eraser tools, and instead of going straight to background eraser tool, we're going to skip to magic eraser tool. So our third option down, we're just going to click on that. And what the magic eraser tool is good for is it's good for erasing like pixels or pixels of similar tones. So this is more of a one click and erase as opposed to a click and paint the pixels that you want to erase. Now, similar to all our other tools, we have our settings at the top. Our tolerance, which is similar to our magic wand selection tool, that erases the range of similar colors or tones, as I said earlier. So the higher the tolerance, the more tones that this eraser is going to erase. We want anti-alias checked for right now. It smooths out the edge of your transition for what you're erasing. And a lot of people aren't really sure what contiguous means, but essentially what contiguous means is it shares a common border. Okay, so if you uncheck that, it's ignoring the borders. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. And whether you want sample all layers or not all layers checked is depending on what you're trying to accomplish here. For right now, we're going to leave it unchecked considering we only have one background layer. And opacity, once again, is the level of transparency. Alright, so unlocking our background layer again, we have our tolerance set to 50, and we have contiguous checked, okay? So once again, that means it's sharing a common border. So if I go ahead and zoom in, and I just want to get rid of these blue tones within this one section here, I'm just going to left click once. And as you can see, that magic eraser tool is erasing all of the pixels that are like that blue area. Wherever we're sampling or clicking, those are the tones that are going to be erased. Now, if we wanted to get rid of all of these blue tones at once, we're just going to uncheck contiguous because we're ignoring the borders, borders being the branches more or less, and we're just going to left click once, and you'll notice that all of the blue tones have been erased in one click. Alright, so that's what this magic eraser is really great for. If you do have a uniform background or tones that are similar that need to go, you can just one click and it's gone. Now keep in mind, you do have your tolerance up here, so if we lower that tolerance, that's going to erase a lot less tones, and it might leave some blue tones left over as well. Okay, so kind of adjust the tolerance as you go through there. If you're not really erasing all the tones that you'd like, or you're erasing too many tones, you can adjust that to your preference. Alright, So that's the magic eraser tool, and last but not least we have our background eraser tool, which is that second option. Now we have several settings up here that we don't have with other tools, and we're just going to go over them. Similar to our brushes, we can change the size, the hardness, and spacing. And then we have these three options here. Let's go ahead and select the first option, being a continuous sampling. Alright, and our limits, we're going to go with discontiguous for right now. That way we are ignoring the borders and erasing all tones within this color. Notice that we also have find edges. That's also going to leave all of the edges there. It's not going to erase any pixels within the branches accidentally, but it might give you a little bit harder, more pixelated edge than discontiguous or contiguous might. So right now we're going to go ahead and check discontiguous. Our tolerance is going to be set to 50. Alright, and we always want to protect that foreground color. And so with this first option selected, our sampling is going to be continuous, and what that means is you'll notice within the cursor there's a little crosshair. So wherever that crosshair is going to be going, or wherever the crosshair is sampling from, is the tone that it's going to be erasing. Okay, so notice we get close to these branches, but it's not erasing those darker tones because it's sampling from the blue tones where that crosshair is. Keep in mind, if we switch back to contiguous, we're going to be restricted to our borders within the branches. Now if you accidentally sample over top of tones that you don't want to erase, wherever those crosshairs are going, it's a continuous sample. It's going to erase whatever the crosshairs touch. Now that takes us to our next option, which is going to be our sampling once, which is exactly what it sounds like. Alright, so if we check sampling once, we want to go discontiguous. Now from our first initial click of these crosshairs, that is the tone that the pixels are going to be erased. Okay, so if I click in this blue area, I can then go over top of the branches, which makes things a lot easier because it's still sampling from that first initial click. Okay, now if I re-click and I end up on a darker tone, it's not going to be erasing the blue, it's just going to be erasing the color of the branches or the darker tones, because it's still from our first initial click sampling that tone and erasing those pixels. Alright, and the last mode we have is our background swatch mode, and that's also exactly what it sounds like. So whatever our background color is, that's going to be the tone that's going to be erased. Especially pending your tolerance up here. So the higher the tolerance, keep in mind, the more pixels that are going to be erased, the wider range of tones. Alright, so since we have that blue selected, we can just start erasing. And notice once again we can go over top of the branches without erasing those tones. So essentially what we learned today is we have our regular eraser, which allows us to click and paint whatever pixels we want to erase. We have our magic eraser, which in one click erases alike pixels or pixels of similar tones. Just remember that you might have to adjust your tolerance to erase more tones or less tones. We learned contiguous and discontiguous. Remember that within a border, contiguous is only going to erase pixels within a border. Now discontiguous is going to ignore that border and erase all tones within the document that match that pixel or that sample. We also went over our background eraser that has three different modes. We have a continuous sampling, which erases any type of pixel that the crosshair touches within our cursor. We have a sample once background eraser, which is going to be from our first initial click. It's going to erase those pixels from your first initial click or those tones. And then we also have our background swatch eraser, which is going to erase the tones that are similar to your background swatch in your document. Alright, so essentially what these eraser tools are good for are removing unwanted objects, maybe removing backgrounds, or removing pixels that are alike or similar in tone in one single click. And this is Ethan Dre with Be Creative Studios video tutorials. I hope you enjoyed today's eraser tutorial. Please check back for our latest. And thank you for watching.